Welcome back to botany class. In the previous class, we discussed the structure and functions of ecosystem. Today, let's begin with energy flow. The topic is energy flow. What's meant by energy flow? You know ecosystem very well. In all kinds of ecosystem, the energy can be transferred from one trophic level to the another trophic level. There are different trophic levels. They are named as T1, T2, T3 and T4. Trophic level 1, trophic level 2, trophic level 3 and trophic level 4. Energy flow, flow of energy. In each and every trophic levels, the energy can be stored and some amount of energy is dissipated in the form of heat. What's meant by energy flow? The transfer of energy from one trophic level to the another trophic level in an ecosystem. In an ecosystem, the energy can be transmitted from a trophic level to another trophic level. For example, the producers. You know that the sun is the source of energy. Here, the sun. Sun is the source of energy. This sun is from the sun, the energy is obtained from green plants. So, these green plants are considered as producers. So, first trophic level T1, producers are named as trophic level 1. They are the green plants because these plants has the ability to store food material, manufacture food material which convert light energy into chemical energy and it prepares its own food. So, this produces energy from this producer transferred to herbivore. And from herbivore, the energy can be transmitted to carnivore. So, energy, this is T1, T2 and T3. Finally, this energy can be transmitted to decomposers. In each and every trophic level, T1, T2, T3 and T4, this energy is obtained. The source of energy is from sun. Sun is the source of energy. Obtained the green plants obtain energy from the sun and it prepares its own food and the energy is stored in the producers. So, this producer is eaten by herbivores. There are some examples, rabbit or mouse, some herbivores which eat these plants. So, some amount of energy it utilized and some amount of energy is stored there and remaining amount of energy is released in the form of heat. So, some amount of energy is released in the form of heat or dissipated in the form of heat. Dissipated means it is scattered and vanished. So, some amount of energy in each trophic level, the 100% energy is not to be stored. Certain amount of energy can be released in the form of heat. So, this is called energy flow. Energy can be stored in a particular trophic level. It can be transferred from every trophic levels. While it is transferring the energy, certain amount of energy is dissipated in the form of heat. Based on this structure and functions of this, so this energy flow is the key function of ecosystem. So, it gives two thermodynamics laws. Based on this, there are two thermodynamics laws. Laws of thermodynamics. So, next question, important 5 mark question is laws of thermodynamics. There are two laws of thermodynamics. First law is law of thermodynamics, and the second law of thermodynamics. There are two different laws of thermodynamics. First law of thermodynamics and second law of thermodynamics. The first law of thermodynamics states that energy can be transferred from one system to another in various forms. So, the first law of thermodynamics states that energy can be transferred from one system to another in various forms. So, here when it is transferring the energy cannot be created nor destroyed. It is not destroyed and it is not created. So, the universal energy which is constant. So, under this according to this law, first law of thermodynamics, the energy in the universe is constant because the energy is either destroyed or created. So, it's constant. Energy is constant. The example of this first law of thermodynamics is photosynthesis process. Photosynthesis. You all know very well about this photosynthesis, which is the main function of plants, green plants. Photosynthesis is considered as the leader process among all the functioning of the plants. There are a number of functions takes place in the plants. So many functions: respiration, transpiration, photosynthesis. So the leader process in green plants is photosynthesis. What's this photosynthesis? Manufacturing its own food. Green plants has the ability to prepare its own food by obtaining energy from the sun. You all know very well, sun is the source of energy. Sun is the source of energy. These green plants obtained this light energy. It traps the light energy because of the pigment chlorophyll. It traps the light energy and convert this light energy into chemical energy. So, light energy is converted into chemical energy and it prepares an organic food, organic compound. So, this can be stored in the producers. There are certain raw materials are used for this reaction, photosynthesis reaction. Let's study the definition of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis, what are the things necessary or what are the things required for photosynthesis is CO2 plus H2O, 6 CO2 and 6 H2O, which gives carbohydrate, that's glucose. So, it gives CHO. So, it gives CHO, C6H12 and O6, C6H12O6. The CO2 plus H2 and it gives oxygen, it releases oxygen. There are 6 O2. This is the overall process of photosynthesis. Very simple. The raw materials of photosynthesis is carbon dioxide and water. Carbon dioxide, water in the presence of light and chlorophyll pigment. The 1 word or 2 mark question, it may be asked what are the raw materials of photosynthetic process. CO2, carbon dioxide and water. 6 molecules of carbon dioxide and 6 molecules of water in the presence of light. Light is the source of energy. Sun is the source of energy. So this chlorophyll pigment which is present in the leaf, all the green parts, the most abundant part of the plant, the green color part is leaf. So this chlorophyll pigment traps the energy from the sun and convert and it prepares C6H12O6, and during this process it releases oxygen. So from the atmosphere, in the environment, in the ecosystem, carbon dioxide is taken during photosynthetic process, carbon dioxide is taken in and oxygen is released. So during this, according to this law, first law of thermodynamics, the energy can be transferred. So carbon dioxide, water, everything is resources. So this is absorbed and oxygen is released, and this is the form of carbohydrate it prepares. Now the energy is stored in the form of carbohydrate in plants. This energy is transferred to these plants are eaten by herbivores. So there are some examples of herbivore, either mouse or rabbit. And when it is all this 100% it cannot consume, but certain amount of energy can be released in the form of heat. And from here the carnivore, the herbivores, then carnivores. This is eaten by either fox or eagle, or fox or eagle. Carnivores. And finally it can be decomposes. The first law of thermodynamics, you write the example photosynthesis. Now second law of thermodynamics. Second law of thermodynamics states that, so first law which states that this flow of energy or this transfer of energy can be transferred from one system to another system with various forms. It transfer the energy. So this producer transfer the energy from one trophic level to another trophic level. This is the first trophic level. Producers are the, you remember that producers are the trophic level 1. First green plants are the producers which transmits the energy, transfer the energy from producer to herbivore, consumers. It consumes primary consumer, secondary consumer and tertiary consumers. Primary consumer, secondary consumer. So it can be written as producer, first producer, then primary consumer, then secondary consumer and tertiary consumers. So here eagle, it comes under the tertiary consumer. In between fox or wolf or any other animals which is eating this one. The primary consumer, secondary consumer, tertiary consumers. Here first law states that energy is flow from one trophic level to another, but the energy is constant. Universal energy is constant. It's not wasted. But second law states that, the second law of thermodynamics, it states that energy transmission result in the reduction of the energy in the ecosystem by respiration. So when heat is released, it states in the second law. First law states that energy is transferred from one system to another, one trophic level to another. But second law states that when energy is transferred, while energy is transferring from different trophic levels, certain amount of energy is released in the form of heat. So as a result of this, as a result of respiration, so some amount of energy which is used for respiration, so certain energy is released in the form of heat. So there is an example for this second law of thermodynamics is 10% law. Look at this pyramid. Here 10% law. What's this? Here the energy can be flow from producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer and tertiary consumers. So this produces the green plants, the plants or the producers, they trap the sunlight energy, light energy and convert it into chemical energy. So it's in the form of carbohydrate, C6H12O6 produces. The plants stores the energy in the form of organic compound. So it is stored in plants. For example, if the producers taken 1000 joules of energy from the sun, light energy, 1000 joules of light energy is taken by producers, the plants takes from the sunlight, from the sun. There 100 joules of energy is stored in the plants. When it absorbs 1000 joules of energy, only 100 joules of energy can be stored in plants. Remaining 900 joules of energy released in the form of heat. Hence, this is only 100 joules are obtained out of 1000 joules. 1000 joules is taken, but 100 joules are stored in producer. Remaining 900 joules are released in the form of heat. Likewise, from among this 100 joules of energy, the primary consumer, the producers are eaten by primary consumers. Here 100 joules of energy is stored in plants, but only 10 joules of energy is taken by primary consumers. Remaining 90% of energy is lost in the form of heat. Likewise, the secondary consumers eats this primary consumer. Primary consumers are eaten by secondary consumers. Only 1 joule out of this 10 joules, only 1 joule is taken in, it's stored in, 1 joule is stored in secondary consumers. Remaining 9 joules are released in the form of heat. Similarly, from the 1 joules of secondary consumer, tertiary consumers taken this. Here 0.1% is stored in tertiary consumer, remaining 0.9% is released in the form of heat. So, finally there is a 10% is stored in each trophic level. So that hence it's called as 10% law. So 10% law is the example of second law of thermodynamics. So you remember that first law of thermodynamics, you write the example photosynthesis. Energy is transferred from one trophic level to another. Energy is neither destroyed nor created. Second law of thermodynamics, while transferring the energy, certain amount of energy is released in the form of heat. It shows, hence this is example 10% law. So this two important, this is laws of thermodynamics. When you are writing this question, photosynthesis, you write this equation, and this second law of thermodynamics, draw this diagram showing that 10% law. Next question, food chain. So next another question is food chain. What's meant by food chain? Food chain is the flow of energy in a linear form. See this linear form, the energy transfer from one trophic level to another trophic level in a linear form. This transfer of energy in a linear form is called as food chain. So there is a linear link obtained, network of linear link obtained due to food chain. For example, there are different food chains. The green plants, this producer, herbivores, producer, the plants are eaten by directly, which is eaten by herbivores. There are number of examples of herbivores. Here we can take the herbivore as rabbit. Rabbit. This rabbit is eaten by hawk. Hawk. This is one example of food chain. So there are two different types of food chain. One type of food chain is called as grazing food chain. Grazing food chain. Another one is detritus. Detritus food chain. There are two types of food chain, grazing food chain and detritus food chain. Grazing food chain is this food chain. Grazing food chain. Plants, producers, consumers and producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer and producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer, tertiary consumers. This is grazing food chain. In grazing food chain. But here the source of energy in grazing food chain, the source of energy is sunlight. You remember this point. In grazing food chain, the source of energy is sunlight. Light is the source of energy. So green plants are the one which traps the light and convert this light energy into chemical energy. So plants or green plants are obtaining energy from the sun and it is transmitted to different trophic level. Another example, these plants are eaten by, instead of rabbit we can take an example, mouse, and this mouse is eaten by snake and this snake is eaten by hawk or eagle, or we can take this eagle. So this is the producer, plants, producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer, tertiary consumer. Producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer, tertiary consumer. But in detritus food chain which is classified into two, grazing food chain as well as detritus food chain. In detritus food chain, in grazing food chain, sun is the source of energy, but detritus food chain, the dead and decayed organic matters are the source of energy. So here there is an example. The detritus consumers, detritus or the waste material, the dead and decayed plants and animals which is rich in organic matters. So the fallen leaves, humus, the fallen leaves, that is the dead part of the plant. Likewise animals, dead and decayed part of plants and animals called detritus. So this detritus consumers are the earthworm. So here the food chain is fallen leaves, earthworm. The earthworm is the detrivores. Earthworm is called as detrivores. And this earthworm is eaten by blackbird. The blackbird which eats the earthworm, and the blackbird is eaten by hawk. So this type, whenever you are writing the food chain, it goes in a linear form. So first you write about fallen leaves and earthworm, blackbird, hawk. This fallen leaves are detritus which is eaten by detrivores. Example of detrivores is earthworm, and the earthworm is eaten by blackbird which is considered a small carnivore, and hawk is the top carnivore. So detrivores, small carnivore, top carnivore. This type of food chain is named as detritus food chain. The grazing food chain as well as detritus food chain. Now another question is there, food web, food chain and now food web. What's meant by food web? So this linear forms of, that is a interlocking system, linear system of network link is called as food chain, but there is a interlocking system of food chain which forms as a web is called as food web. How is it? Let's say an example. food verb. Here, in the absence of in an ecosystem, in the food chain, in a food chain, the basic is it starts from the producer plants. These plants are eaten by herbivore. Here there is an example, herbivore rabbit. This rabbit is directly eaten by hawk. In the absence of this rabbit, sometime in the absence of rabbit, this plant is eaten by mouse. And this mouse is eaten by snake. And this snake is eaten by hawk. So, in the absence of rabbit, the plants are eaten by mouse. So, mouse which eats the grains or anything, and which is directly eaten by snake, and the snake is eaten by hawk. Or in the plants, this plant is again eaten by grasshopper. And this grasshopper is eaten by lizard, and this lizard is eaten by snake, and it is eaten by hawk. Or this grasshopper is directly eaten by this hawk. Or this mouse is directly eaten by this hawk. So, there is a interlink between this in this food chain. Here food chain which goes as a linear, but here there is a interlocking system. It forms as a web, food web, that is called food web. The food chain and food web. What are the significance of the food web? So, this is the key function. The energy flow is the key function. So, the main significance of this food web is, or food web or food chain is, it balances the ecosystem. The plants are eaten by herbivores are eaten by carnivore, and finally everything is decomposed. So, it balances the ecosystem. So, what are the significance? So, constructed this described species interaction, this food web, which shows what are the significance of food web. It constructed the interactions of the direct interaction. So, during food chain we are seeing the direct interaction of the species interaction. And another significance is it's used to illustrate indirect interaction. Sometimes it is not a direct, it indirectly there is an interactions. And the study of bottom to top community structures. So, here we can study about the producers from the plants, green plants. There are different types of ecosystems. There are forest ecosystem, grassland ecosystem, pond ecosystem, so many ecosystems. So, we can study about the top to bottom of the community structure. And it used to reveal different patterns of energy transfer. Here we studied some examples. There are different patterns of energy flow. These are the significance of food web. So, once again let us review what you learned today. Energy flow. So, first question, you are going to learn the definition, what is meant by energy flow, and what are the laws related to energy flow, that is thermodynamics, first law of thermodynamics and second law of thermodynamics. Third question, food chain. Food chain, here instead of this in the book it has given the diagrams. So, you draw the diagram, and if it is sometimes in the question paper they give the diagram, different forms of food chain and food web they give and ask to write, find out the particular terms and particular system, or they may ask this different terms: producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer, or tertiary consumer, and so on. They may ask, or they may ask to create a food chain or food web. Then here under this thermodynamics law, first law you write the example photosynthesis, and second law you write about the 10% law. Then finally food web. What is food web? Write the example and significance of food web. Learn all this question and draw all the diagrams in the class note. Thank you.